Good morning. My name is Harry Blanche. I'm the CEO of the Document Digital. Welcome to the final installment of our three-part webinar series, Charting Your Digital Future. Today, we'll be talking about how the Digital Launchpad can enhance your current contract and project management use cases, as well as discuss our additional help desk functionality. But first, let's do a recap of our previous two webinars. In the first webinar, we shone a light on the fact that most of your business processes work in the dark when it relates to business processes. We spoke about lighthouse projects, which are often done in silos, where the department gains value from a product, such as the one we're talking about today, but other departments are unaware of the potential value this could bring to their departments. And we asked ourselves, how can we change that? How can we centralize information and how it's managed, whilst creating efficiency within and between departments? We launched the Digital Launchpad, powered by mFiles, a global leading information management provider. With 6 business-related workflows that applies across all or some departments, it comes standard with these as part of the offering. This ranges from document approval, leave, help desk, payment requisition approval process, expense claim, and contract management. Our focus today will look at both help desk and contract management. In future, we look to expand that to offer more value to customers, but as the current version stands, this is what we have to offer. What this means is that you as a business can look to accelerate to a more digital future with quick time to value, pre-built document structures, and these 6 processes, which can be accessed via mobile and Windows client. The Digital Launchpad is also free for all our customers. As each customer is unique, these processes and structures can be modified, or additional processes and structures can be built according to your requirements. And this, of course, requires some consulting, but in essence, your structure and process as a baseline is pre-built. In the second webinar, we dived a little bit more into detail around information silo and processes. We focused on both finance and HR, looked at a few of the processes that relate to these departments within the Launchpad. And if we look at what the reasoning is that the main challenges that arise within departments and within silos within departments is that we see so many different processes that are handled in so many different ways, and there's no efficiency created as such, and we are unable to measure that in terms of how those processes are derived. We also asked ourselves, what is the information silos of your business could be consolidated into that single system, into the Digital Launchpad? And what if the information in your business could be more connected, using examples like being able to, one, use information across a finance and project type scope, or using accounting information to reuse within a system by integrating or connecting to that system. So the most important part of this being that the information is secure, seamlessly accessible, but also visible to all that required to see it. Today, we will look at the other challenges that the Digital Launchpad looks to solve, at least for now. As mentioned, we try to see how we potentially can expand that to other business areas as well. First, we'll take a look at contract management. Now, for contract managers or people managing contracts within departments without that official title, traditional tools like spreadsheets, emails, Outlook reminders or tasks, local storing of that information can lead to potential missed deadlines, outdated information being available to business, and a lack of document control. What we see as the common pain points in contract management may include uncertainty around what information has changed and when on that document, and contracts being so critical to a function within that business, that becomes quite detrimental to that business. Missing renewal dates or deadlines due to Outlook reminders permanently being snoozed. Ensuring correct access is granted to contracts that may span multiple departments or even just within that department. If someone has that contract in their drawer, who knows of that? Who knows what access is then granted through that physical piece of paper or not? And then a bit to that point, inconsistent document storage locations, one being that third drawer on your right on your desk, or on your local drive on your machine, or a shared drive, but with a very limited access where the people that need to execute the contract may need access to that as well. So when we look at the Launchpad and how we can use that to refine contract management within an organization, we look at the way we can assist in somewhat automating that approach. Let's look at some of the solutions that brings within that space. Now, if we look at firstly how we can automate role-based notifications, and that means that as we go through the different steps in that process of contract management, for instance, how we can allow access to that information based on being an author of that contract, being a reviewer of that contract, or being the contract owner, or once the contract is activated to expand access to that and provide necessary notifications of that active contract being in the system. And with that comes that type of reminder. So getting an email that you have a task to do, that something is due to expire. So at its core, central document storage. We've spoken about these different silos. Now we try and consolidate that within a single system. So the same applies here. We would try and centralize this as part of the wider document store within the company, make it accessible to the right people within that company, keep a single source of truth, ensure version history throughout that contract lifecycle. And that'll explain a bit more within the demo I'll do just now. So automatic security, so securing a contract based on the related department, user roles, who the contract owner is, as mentioned earlier, and then means that it's secured but accessible to the right audience. Apologies. And lastly, the integrated workflow process, which we will demo now and show what we do as part of that process now that could align to how you currently work or be modified to how you could potentially work in the future within the system scope. So let's get going with a short demo. So I'll quickly unshare my screen. And let's start within the mFiles space. So I'm accessing mFiles from my Windows desktop. I've got 3 roles that I'll play through the demo. And if you've been in one of the previous demos, we've used these users and user roles previously. In this case, Brian is the IT manager, Anne is the HR and CIO of the company. So she'll have access to all the relevant information. And I'll play the instigator or the initiator of these different processes within the demo. So I'm going to log in to the system, and in my case, I've logged in as a Windows user, so it authenticates already based on what my user access is within the system. And we'll start off by actually creating a client contract. We'll create an NDA and take that through a review and approval process, send that through for an external party to sign. We won't sign that using technology such as doc can be integrated within a process like this. And once that contract comes back, and let's say it's received back by email, how we replace that document in the system, keeping that history of how that contract had gone from a template to a final document within the process. So I'm going to open up my templates area, go to my contracts. I've got an NDA that I've going to use, and for anyone that needs to create one within the company, they can use. I'll double click that and fill in a bit of information and say this is for, say it's for HR, and it says NDA. The client, we're going to link to this. I'll create a new client. So let's say this is related to a new client. I will call them new client. I'm also going to fill in some additional information. Gauteng. Of course, some of this information could already exist in an accounting system that could potentially be linked to be reused as metadata within the system. I'm just going to fill in some final information. Why I'm doing that is also that we can see some of that information within the contract itself, so that auto-populates as we complete the information. Let's look at some details. We're not filling in any effective date now. I'm going to say I'm the document owner, the authors. I'm also that. The reviewer will be Brian, and Anne will be the overall group. Let's create, and it will launch Word for me to continue working on this pre-built template. This is our standard NDA. And what it does is it will complete some information based on what I had already filled in on that metadata or information about the client. And what it does then is everywhere where that needs to be completed on the document, that will then be completed. As you can see, that's been completed. And then let's just say, so we'll not very original in this, but we'll use my name for both parts. And I'm happy. I'm going to save it, close it, save it. And as I complete that, it will create that assignment for me, so that if I need to continue drafting this document, I can do so until the point I'm ready to send it for review. Let's fast forward due to a time constraint and send that through to review. Now, within the bottom right, you'll see me change the step in the process that I'm going to follow. So I'll just say, happy with 12 month. Save it. And that will be removed from my to-do list or my assignments. I'll quickly revert back to the login screen and log in as Brian, as he was the reviewer in this case. You'll get an email from the system stating he has something to do. The assignment pops up. I go into the system. I double click the document. I check it out to see, make any changes to it potentially. So that helps with the versioning of the document. Okay, let's look at that. Let's just see on this side. I see there was a comment as well from me. And let's just keep scrolling. I want to change one thing here. Let's just look at 12. So this 12 months, I just want to change to 24. This is quite a confidential negotiation we're busy with. Nothing else that changes on the standard document. And that's the only change Brian makes. And as he decides, he sends it off and says his review is complete, saves it, gets removed from his to-do list. I go out of the system, I log in as Anne, and would get a final, be the final approver. Let's see, there we go, new assignment. Open it up, double click it. And as and time is extremely precious, I'm just going to use the compare function within mfiles just to check, okay, what's changed from the first version. So let's see from the point at which it was drafted, what has changed, so that she doesn't have to go through all the information. You can, of course, use the normal track changes function in Word, but in this case, I can see that this information has changed from 12 to 24 within the system, and she needs to decide if she's happy with that. If we say that, yes, she's in agreement that that should be a longer period, she will close that document and approve it. Approve. Of course, you could send it back to the first state, to the reviewer as part of that process, but again, due to time constraints, we'll keep it simple and save it. Take a little bit longer because it will make it a PDF document. And as I complete it, I'll flip back to my own user for me to sign, to send it off for someone else to sign externally. And I'll do that just creating a visitor link that they'll get access to the document and then send it via email back to me. Let's see. Okay. So I'm happy this is now a PDF document. I'm opening it up quickly. I use FineReader as a PDF product instead of Adobe. And I will go bottom. And just for argument's sake, sign it. I will quickly create a visitor link, send it to the other Harry that exists. So that person can access this link. I'll send off an email quickly to them. I'm just going to misspell that so that it is send. I'll send them the link. And we'll fast forward and receive that back from them. Just again, essence of time. I'm going to then drag and drop this signed document that we received back into the system. And what we'll see now is a document that's been signed by the counterparty as well. They would have potentially used Adobe or FineReader as well. And for this case, I'm happy, and I'm just going to say it's signed. Okay. So we've now worked this through and greatly mentioned that it needs an effective date to be completed, and just change the expiry date. So let's say that's actually valid for 2 years. 29th. So what will happen is a month before that expiration date, it will send a task to myself and the author if the owner and author differed. And then that will be tasked to then take action to either renew that NDA or whatever the case may be. Where the information is stored. So we've now worked within templates and use the assignments to complete this, but what would logically happen is it will file it in a place that we've created called a view. So if we go to contract documents, we'll see within our client contracts, we will see, okay, for this new client, we now have this active contract. So I could go back and see other contracts. Again, having the opportunity to have a central place for both client and supply contracts with the right access granted based on, for instance, department and the necessary people involved with that process. So if I can see over here, for instance, it's limited to a certain audience in terms of who can see that. It can be expanded at the point when it becomes active, but it's up to you how that security is applied throughout that process. So that really looks at the whole process from start to finish in a really accelerated way. If we look at just what information is captured during that process, just to provide a little bit of insight, if we go to the history of that process itself, I can see how it exchanged hands from the point it was started to the point it was finished, and which users had been involved in which steps in that process. So again, you get a good bird's eye view and even detailed picture of how that had transpired and how the versioning of that had changed throughout. And I can review any of the older versions if I need to. All right, so just going to stop sharing and then go back to the presentation. And then we'll continue on with the next subject, which in this case would be project management. I just lost my train of thought, apologies. All right, so let's get back into it. Let's look at project management. Essence of time, you can see got a lot to get through in 9 minutes. So let's look at project management. So imagine a project that requires collaboration across clients, projects, project phases, etc. Files being stored in different places, naming conventions varying between project, between type of document, and where security protocols are inconsistent. We are often stuck with these type of documents and rely heavily on a project manager to help us manage that. And with the amount of work they typically have, it becomes a really cumbersome or difficult process to do. So we looked at the typical challenges they face daily, and we made some assumptions, of course. It could vary by company in terms of if they're in construction or in a more IT-based environment, but most might find the same type of challenges. So if we look at a difficulty in managing project information across a project without compromising security, for instance, if you have a document that belongs to multiple projects, how do you effectively manage that without duplicating that? There's, of course, the challenge of lack of standardized namings, causing confusions and inefficiencies in how we manage that information. If we take an example where there's a guideline as how something needs to be named, but it still relies on the user to name that correctly. And then when we look at how we find it difficult to track project progress, especially from a document perspective, not necessarily from a Microsoft projects or Teamwork or ClickUp or that type of tool that helps manage the timeline. But how do we manage the documents themselves? How do we manage it through a process, make sure that all the right documents are in the right phases of the process and project, and make sure that we create a deliverable at the end of the day that's effectively the correct one from a client perspective. Let's look at what the Digital Launchpad does in terms of transforming that project management environment and how teams work together. So one system view, so how do we save and view that information? Similar to how I showed how the contract management environment works, we went into contracts and saw contracts by client. How do we see information by project phase, for instance, or by type of document within different projects? Look at that. Automatic naming conventions, as mentioned, trying to standardize formats. And then linking documents to project phases, to milestones, to different tasks within that project, and making that easily executable. So let's take a look at that practically. Let's go back to start. So we'll head back into M-Files and be logged in as myself again. And for this part, we will actually take a document or two that lives outside of the system and get that into the system. So let's, for instance, say we have a drawing for the project that we want to save, and I'm going to just add it to M-Files in this way. I can drag and drop it, copy and paste it into the system. Now what you'll see is I'm not going to a specific folder to save something. I'm just saving it from the desktop or from a location on my machine. It can be drag and drop from email as well. Let's say we want to save this as a drawing. So we classify it as that type. We say it's for today, and I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to say that the status is final document, and it's a as-built drawing. It relates to the environmental upgrade project, and it relates to the second phase of that project. So we're accessing additional information within that space to set permissions, etc. So I've gone from this to saving it into M files. And now if I go to my projects area within the system, I should find that document within that project or within that project phase, depending on how I want to see that information. Let's just go by project and that environmental upgrade project. And within that, I will have a classification of the different document types that exist for this project. If I go into the drawings, I will then see the different drawings. And as you'll see, it's taken it from being a very generically named document into a format of naming the document, which can be managed according to how you want that to be named. So just to give you an idea of the sequence it continues on. And if we were to save a manual, for instance, for the same project, it's going to follow a different sequence, in this case, based on the manuals having their own follow numbers and so on. Quickly saving this manual as well. It's actually picked up that it is a manual. It's today, just copy paste. So it's the final document. It relates to that same environmental project. It's not specific to a phase. So let's create that. As we flip back on this, I can then, within this, just find that document. So here's that sprinkler document, and you see there's a few older documents in there, but we've continued the naming from that point onwards. So it follows that approach. So it gives a consistency in how information is named. So you don't have to keep a separate document register, etc. I could also do a quick search if I wanted to find that. So just quickly going, see, for instance, there's my sprinkler manual document based on that search of that. One thing to focus on, of course, is as we look at security, and as we quickly run out of time, I will just quickly show that to you. So when we look at assigning security, in this case, we work on the project itself and who has access to that. And we can change that project team quite dynamically just by, for instance, saying that for this project, we have a set amount of users that have access to this project. But if I want, I can add a new person to that project. And what will happen is the security would apply to all documents within that project to then allow that person to access the need for that project. It normally takes 5 to 10 seconds. I'll quickly just do a refresh to see that apply. And let's just see the permissions. Let's see, not yet. A few more seconds, worth the wait. Maybe not worth the wait, we'll see. Just quickly give it a last view. Not yet. Okay, I'll come back to that just now if there's time. Let's quickly just get through the last bit and showcase just a little bit about the help desk process. So let's go and look at the last bit of the process being related to help desk. Now, with help desk, many organizations, IT and facilities related issues are typically managed within email space. So it's very difficult to track and resolve issues effectively without sending someone an email, getting that information back. So if we look at these type of challenges that are faced, there's no formal system for logging. We don't want to buy a whole help desk system for a small company. We find it difficult to measure that department's efficiency because we don't have a system to manage that. And there's lack of visibility because there's no system to actually see what's going on. So again, something we assist with from a process perspective in terms of help desk and how we manage that. So we look at centralizing that issue logging and how we manage that. We can track that from start to finish. So we have a timeline, as we saw with the contract. And then, of course, visibility and escalation paths, actually creating escalations based on non-responsiveness of someone that needs to assist with that type of process. So lastly, we'll have a very quick look, and apologies for running over, and thank you for staying on. Let's quickly look at that practically from an M-Files perspective. Let's just share screen. And as I would hope would have happened just now is, yes, there we go. So you can see Tina's now added to that project document. It just takes a while. It happens as a background task, so it's not always automatic, especially in big systems. All right, so lastly, I'm going to create a help desk task. So previously worked on documents, but now we're actually going to just create information and create a form type approach to filling in information. So let's say my department, I'll say I'm from finance. I'm affected by this, but it relates to, let's say, Outlook. And Outlook is not receiving emails. Sounds still. I'm going to send it to Brian because he's the responsible IT person. Going to create that quickly and then log in as Brian. So let's go log in as Brian. Should see an assignment. There we go. He goes, checks, he sees, oh, actually my mailbox is full. He assigns additional space to mailbox. And there's he saves it, he completes his task, and if he needs to add screenshots, things like that, he can do that. He can say it's resolved. He sends it back to me to check. And I log in my Outlook. I see my mails are starting to stream in, and I say, yes, thank you, Brian. The issue has been resolved, and I can close that ticket on my side, confirming that I'm happy that it's been done. So I'll complete that, save it, and the ticket closes. So we then have a history of that interaction happening within that department that was responsible for that system. It could relate to physical assets and things like that, and management thereof. My office light is out and I need to send to facilities, etc. So I can see all those type of help desks now by system. So we can see practically how many times has this happened, for instance, from an Outlook perspective. So you can see, okay, there's been 2 tickets logged in 2 days by me. I'm getting thousands of mails, and that might be the reason for that. Or I can see that there's a trend in a system creating issues. I need to speak to the vendor to help resolve that. So it gives us a lot more insight into how we manage that interactions between departments internally to resolve business critical systems. Let's stop. Okay, let's go lastly and just finish off. All right, so if we look at the summary of what we've looked at, in terms of what we try to offer is we try and bring clarity and structure to critical functions within the organization. Of course, some of it might be more mature than others in terms of departments or companies. So the audience I'm speaking to is quite wide in terms of who that may touch and not. But the idea is that we try and eliminate these information silos and create these automations that assist these different departments, empowering these teams to work smarter, not harder. Overdone, coined phrase, but definitely very much applicable here. And then, of course, thank you for attending and making time to attend this session. It's much appreciated. Welcome to set up a further discussion with us, or if you just have any comments, questions, or suggestions of what could be next in terms of the system development, we'll be happy to hear from you. So please send us a mail at info@edwdigital.com. And again, thanks for attending this webinar series. Look out for the next phase of these webinars as we will go into more MFAL-specific functionalities and features. But again, thanks for your time and attendance. We appreciate it. Thank you.